Chapter 33, Awakening. My head throbbed. I could hear noises around me, but my ears continued to ring. I struggled to get my arms free to dig myself out. My arms were pinned to my side. "He's awake," said a voice somewhere in the fog. Landers. They'd survived. I'd been captured. Shadowy forms, maybe 3 or 4 of them, approached. I winced, preparing for a blow to my head or a gunshot between the eyes. Instead, I felt a soft kiss on my cheek. A face took shape. Elena. "Sunlight takes a little getting used to after a couple of months in a mine, doesn't it?" she said. She took my hand and squeezed my fingers. "Elena," I said, tears filled in my eyes. "Is it over?" I croaked. Elena just nodded. Fatima came up next to Elena. "We know what Alec did," she said. "We're safe now. The Landers are gone." All I could do was nod. The effort must have been completely drained me, because I apparently fell back into unconsciousness again. The last thing I saw was a hallucination, a vision of my mother and father alive, standing next to the bed. "We survived," I whispered. Eventually, days later, I woke up. I was in a hospital room, not in a tunnel, lying on a makeshift cot. There was only one place where a room like that existed, the base hospital. It was above ground to provide easy access to medical vehicles from the colony or the farming district. The windows must have been shattered in the attack because the glass was completely gone. A warm, muggy breeze was flapping the posters that Mandeep or a helper had tacked in place as makeshift curtains. One corner had come loose, and it made little snapping sounds when the breeze gusted. I stared at it. "We are what makes Melming Mining great. We all work together." I could hear the sound of kids playing soccer or something outside. Darcy's laugh carried into the room, and I choked up. "So, fearless leader, are you with us for a while this time?" Elena's voice, a wonderful sound. I turned to face her and smiled. "I hope so," I said, wincing at my stiff muscles. She was sitting on a chair next to me. She had bags under her eyes and looked exhausted but beautiful. Her hair had grown even longer. She'd reached her hand out to me, and I reached my left hand to touch her. I stopped. I was missing 2 fingers, my middle finger and ring finger on my left hand. Elena's lips quivered. "We thought you were dead. When we found you, your body was so bloody and twisted. We needed to cut the digger apart before the hole caved in around you, more than it already had. It wasn't a very precise operation under the circumstances." "It's a pretty small price to pay," I said. "And hey, I can make the I rock symbol with my hand way easier now." I threw my hand in the air and stuck out my tongue. Elena laughed so hard, I thought I'd cry. "How did you find me?" I said after we'd calmed down. "As soon as I found the beacon, I dropped Darcy back at camp." "The beacon," I said. "Did you fire it off? What does it look like?" "Whoa, one thing at a time. I'll get to the beacon in a second, but back to your original question. It took me and Fatima all of 2 seconds to figure out that you and Alec had both left with diggers." "So?" Elena frowned at me. "Fatima realized at least one of you had to be in a digger with a warning signal inside." "You were able to follow Alec?" "Not right away, but when we couldn't pick up the signal closer to camp, we knew you were heading farther away. You weren't looking for the beacon, so where could you be heading?" She stared at me, her lips pursed but trembling. I looked away. I didn't want to put anyone else in danger, so I needed to keep the plan a secret. Alec only found out by accident. Elena shook her head and pointed her finger at me. "Don't you ever do that again. I'm not kidding. From now on, you do not shut me out." I hope I'd never have to come up with a plan like that again. "I'm not talking about strategy, Christopher." I was confused. "I got your letter," Elena said. My cheeks turned red. I'd said a lot of things, personal things in that letter, stuff I just couldn't tell Elena face to face. She tossed the letter onto the end of the bed. "I didn't read it, Christopher. I'd like to think I didn't have to know what you'd say." I took the folded paper in my hands and turned it over again and again. Was Elena asking me to say those things now? Why was I still so flustered and confused? My head started to hurt again. Elena was clearly waiting for me to say something, but what? The door slammed and Pavel ran into the room. Guys, there's a signal coming from Earth. Then he ducked back into the hallway. The door swung on its hinges. I turned to Elena, but the moment had passed. She was standing, smoothing her shirt front. She didn't look at me. We did find the beacon. It wasn't a pie with whipped cream. Darcy was very disappointed. Which sequence was right, yards or miles? It's always about the codes with you, isn't it? Not surprisingly, given your love of threes, Tunnel 3 was the right starting point, she added, shaking her head. And it was definitely miles. If it had been yards, we'd have found you and Alec before the attack. So what was it like? It was more like a giant series of connected discs very close to the surface. The numbers in the squares turned out to be the code to activate the emergency signal. We triggered it 2 days ago, after we were certain all the landers had died in the explosion. The signal has been going out ever since. Of course, the blackout only ended today. Today? I've been out cold for nearly 2 weeks. I struggled to get up. Elena put a hand on my shoulder. I'll get a wheelchair. We should all hear this message together, she said. She left. I went to put the letter on my bedside table. Elena's picture was there, burnt a little around the edges and ripped and taped back together. I tossed my letter to the side. I resolved to tell Elena what was in that letter as soon as she came back. The door swung open again. Elena, It wasn't Elena. It was Mandy. Elena followed behind her, pushing a wheelchair. I shut my mouth and closed my eyes. Idiot, I thought again. This is not a good idea, Mandy said. He shouldn't move too much. Elena rolled her eyes. I'm in charge here, and I demand to be let go, I said. And I'm not taking a vote. Mandy looked angry, but she and Elena eased me out of the bed and onto the wheelchair. It hurt a lot. Elena carefully tucked some blankets around my legs. I tried to grab her hand to try to send her some kind of signal, but she quickly walked around behind the chair and began to push me down the hallway. So many questions were left unanswered. Who were the landers? Who were they working for? Where had they hidden before the blackout? Maybe whoever was answering our distress call could help. The doorway ended outside a small office. Pavel was sitting on a chair in front of a radio receiver, squeezing the headphones tightly over his ears. He looked up when he saw me come in and dropped the headphones around his neck. The landers destroyed all the other stuff, so I grabbed this one from the digger. It's tuned into the same frequency as the beacon. Nice work, I said. He put the headphones back on and turned to the radio. It's starting up again. Every few seconds or so, he scribbled something down on a sheet of paper. Then he took off the headphones. I had to listen to it a few times to be sure, but I think I got it all, he said. He handed me the paper. They are coming to get you. 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 I looked at Pavel, who smiled. It's been repeating that same message for about 5 minutes now. Yes, rescue, I said. Elena hugged me. We all began dancing around the room. Fatima and Mandeep gave each other a high five. Pavel twirled in his chair. Then he cocked his head. Wait, there's something else coming through. He clasped the earphones back over his ears and began decoding the message. He closed his eyes, concentrating, then grabbing his pencil and began writing. He handed me the paper, a stunned expression on his face. I read it with a growing sense of alarm. They are coming to get you. They are coming to get you. Hide, hide, hide.